Howdy folks, welcome back to Boondockery. Today's video is going to be focusing on how we deal with wet weather conditions when we're trying to enjoy our time in the woods. One thing we all have to contend with when we want to enjoy our time in the woods is the weather. If you're like me, your time is a precious commodity. When you plan ahead and you set that date to where you're going to be going to the woods, you want to be able to be prepared to enjoy that time regardless of what the weather conditions are. One weather condition that can radically affect our precious woods time is rain. Whenever I think about the rain, I'm always reminded of the scene from the movie Forrest Gump when Forrest describes the rain in Vietnam. And one day, it started raining. We have been through every kind of rain. There was little bitty stinging rain, big old fat rain, rain that flew sideways, and sometimes the rain even seemed like it came straight up from beneath. Every kind of rain presents its own challenges, and it requires different means by which to deal with them. If the rain wasn't a big enough issue to deal with on its own, we also need to consider our activity and the temperature. There is no one solution to deal with this situation. However, during this video, I'm going to discuss many different possibilities by which we can enjoy our time in the woods even when it's raining. Any form of excessive moisture in the air is going to affect our experience of the woods. Any moisture that comes in the form of high humidity, fog, gentle misting, sprinkles, gentle showers, snow, hail, all the way up to monsoon-like rains. Our experience with the moisture can range from being absolutely refreshing all the way to being life-threatening. On those hot summer days when the humidity is really high, it can actually prevent our perspiration from being able to evaporate to cool our bodies. This inability for us to be able to cool ourselves naturally can be very dangerous. On those cooler days, wet clothing can actually prevent your body from being able to generate and retain the level of heat that it needs to maintain your core body temperature. That kind of situation can rapidly turn into hypothermia and be quite life-threatening. Moisture doesn't only affect our bodies, it also affects our gear and equipment we take to the woods with us. Dealing with wet weather can be tolerable as long as we know that when we get to camp and we set everything up, we can actually change our wet clothes into good, comfy, dry clothes. But if you realize that your pack wasn't protected and those nice dry clothes you were looking so forward to are now soaking wet, not only will that crush your morale, but it could also create a life-threatening situation. Historically, we've always found ways to help keep ourselves dry and our equipment. Even as far back as prehistoric times, early man learned how to use tanned hides and oil them in a manner in which they were actually waterproof. During the early 18th century, technological advancements in the fabrication of textiles led to the ability to be able to have much tighter weaves in fabrics such as canvas. This tighter weave allowed that canvas to be able to be exposed to the elements for a much longer period of time before it actually winds up soaking through. Also during the same time period, it was common practice to treat fabrics with linseed oil, creating oilcloth, as well as using beeswax to be able to wax canvas goods in order to make them more water resistant, if not waterproof. During the Civil War, Union troops were actually issued a rubberized fabric tarp that they could use in any variety of ways. Rubber coating was king until the late 20th century, when technological advancements once again came to the rescue of people that wanted to spend their time outside. New and innovative technologies created materials such as Gore-Tex. As time continues to pass, rest assured that there are people out there developing new and innovative ways to keep us dry in the woods, and will far into the future. Let's look at some of the ways that we can address these wet weather conditions. Most of us will procure specialized wet weather clothing and backpacks and other types of gear that is resistant to the rain. Before we get into looking at examples of wet weather clothing, let's discuss the differences between waterproof versus water resistant. Waterproof is exactly that. Moisture in any way, shape, or form cannot permeate the material. Waterproof clothing and equipment will feature all kinds of waterproof materials and techniques for waterproofing. Only non-porous materials like rubber are truly waterproof. True waterproof materials will prevent water from getting in. However, it will also prevent moisture from escaping and is therefore not breathable. True waterproof clothing will usually have sealed seams of some type. There are two types of seam sealing. Products that have critically sealed seams only have sealed seams where they're prone to the most exposure to moisture. That being said, it leaves all of the other seams exposed to the potential of leaking. Products that are fully seam sealed have 100% of the seams sealed. There are two types of seam sealing. Tape seams utilize a waterproof tape to cover the connection points of the parts of the fabric that are sewn together, preventing the moisture that enters through the small holes of the stitching from passing through to the interior of the garment. Welded seams utilize a type of glue or go through a process of sonic welding to attach the pieces of fabric together to where there is no stitching, so therefore there is no holes for the water to pass through. Primarily, there are two types of material that are used in waterproof or water-resistant clothing, and they're broken down into two categories: hard shell and soft shell. Hard shell fabrics are not very stretchy. They're usually much more rigid, but it's usually the materials that is used primarily in waterproof clothing construction. Some hard shell fabrics are actually breathable, like Gore-Tex. Hard shell fabrics are known to make a good bit of noise when you're maneuvering through the woods. Hard shell fabrics are considered to be the most waterproof protection you can protect yourself from conditions such as rain and heavy wet snow. Hard shell fabric doesn't compress very well and generally is a little heavier than soft shell. Soft shell fabric is soft, flexible, and stretchy and is usually made for water-resistant garments. Some soft shell fabrics are actually designed in a way to where they actually offer some degree of insulation. Soft shell fabric is much more quiet to wear in the woods. Most soft shell fabrics will only protect you from a light rain. Almost all soft shell fabrics are treated with a DWR, which is a durable water repellent treatment. Water-resistant fabrics rely on a variety of different technologies combined in order to allow that garment to be able to resist light amounts of moisture. Let's take a look at some of the clothing and gear that I have that is waterproof and water-resistant. We're going to start off by looking at water-resistant clothing. And all of these forms of water-resistant clothing, minus one, are considered soft shell. I have one example which would probably be considered more of a hard shell due to the fabric that it's made of. Two of these garments, I have a rain shirt and a pair of trousers that are designed with a soft shell type of material that the United States military uses for their soft shell wet weather clothing. And I have another, which is probably the most common form of a soft shell that most of you may be familiar with. It has a very soft, flexible, smooth surface to it, and it will remind you more of like a harder surfaced fleece than it would any other type of waterproof clothing. And the last one I have is actually a nylon-based shell, which again would probably be considered more of a hard shell, but it's very thin and much more flexible than most other hard shell type of fabrics. This style of soft shell fabric, which the United States military, and I'm certain many other military forces across the globe, utilizes the same type of material. We're going to start off with these, and these are much more water resistant than any of the other forms of water resistant clothing I have. And when you're exposed to any degree of moisture or water, you will see that the water just beads off the surface. And you give it a shake and it does not soak through. However, when it's exposed to light pressure, like the pressure of just gently falling water, it does its job. The pores in the fabric do their job by not absorbing the standing liquid. However, when you are in driving rain, the force of individual rain droplets can actually permeate and penetrate the fibers of this clothing. In addition, if you were to massage or have a lot of friction in an area that is wet, it will soak through over a period of time. And so therefore it is not waterproof. The amount of force that's behind a raindrop is remarkable, and you would not think about it, but when it hits with tremendous force, and because it's liquid you don't feel it. But if you were to be hit by a marble with the same amount of force that a raindrop hits you, you would be like running for cover quick. Now the next form of a soft shell is made from a fabric that most of you will probably be much more familiar with. And this particular fabric is nice and pliable. It's very comfortable. This one's actually fleece lined and can actually work very, very well as an insulative layer. However, the fabric itself is not particularly water resistant. And what makes this fabric water resistant is the DWR, the Durable Water Repellent Treatment. And for this particular product, it's made by Condor. I've owned it for many, many years, and well in excess of 10 years. The DWR wore off very quickly. And also, if this garment is laundered once, all of that DWR is now gone. And would have to be retreated with a DWR in order to regain that water repellency. And just like we did with the last type of fabric, we're going to go ahead and pour some water on here. And you notice something? All of a sudden, this material absorbed the water. This material has lost all of the DWR, and therefore exposing the fact that the fabric itself is not water repellent. The only thing that made this style of soft shell rain gear water repellent was the DWR treatment. The last soft shell that I'm going to talk about, which arguably can be considered a hard shell because of the nature of the fabric. I consider this a water resistant soft shell because the fabric itself is much more pliable than the heavier hard shell waterproof garments that I have. This was advertised through the labeling as being waterproof rain jacket, and it is not. It does repel water to some degree, but as you can see, much of the water has already saturated through the fabric itself, and it was with soft water, not driving rain. When I purchased this, I bought it as a rain jacket, and my first time in it was a light drizzle. It soaked through and was absolutely pointless. On the labeling, there is nothing to be said about the DWR treatment. And when you look at the interior, of this garment. It has all of the earmarks that you would have with a waterproof garment. And it is lined, so it makes it much more difficult to see. However, all of the seams, there's a seam going through here, it has been sealed. This is a taped seam. All of the seams in the entire garment have been taped. It does no good whatsoever to spend all the time and the money to seal the seams on a garment that is made of a fabric that is not waterproof, or for that matter, water resistant. And the DWR, if it was ever on there, failed miserably. With most water resistant clothing that you may have, when it comes from the factory and the DWR is well done and it begins to lose its waterproofing, most garments that are well made and do have a very well applied DWR, that DWR can be reactivated. The one thing that you would need to do is you would need to check the actual fabric itself, and if there is any standing dirt, mud, anything like that, you would want to spot clean that with a dry brush and to brush that off as vigorously as you can and as clean as you can. You could even use a little shop vac or something like that, a little dust devil, to remove any of the remaining dust that's on it. And then you put it in a dryer on medium heat, 15 to 20 minutes, and it will reactivate the DWR to some degree. It will never be as strong or as effective as it originally was, but it will, give it a little bit of extra life until you've decided that you want to retreat your durable water repellent treatment. There are a lot of different types of DWRs that you could use to reestablish a water resistant or a waterproof coating to any of your soft shell fabrics. This particular fabric here, I could use a waterproof treatment or a water resistant treatment. And water resistant treatments are ones that I would say would be applied to breathable types of garments, which this isn't. And that comes in a couple of different forms. Right here I have two examples of the types of DWR that you can apply yourself to your water resistant or waterproof clothing. We have one here that's called Boot Waterproof. There's also tons of other products that are like this. You can pick them up at most sporting goods stores that sell tents. You have a lot of spray-on seam sealers that come in an aerosol base that you can apply to the entire surface of a garment. This is designed to waterproof boots, waterproof them. Both of these products are silicone based, but one of which is designed with a heavier silicone level in it. It has more silicone in it than this one here. This is called Camp Dry, and Camp Dry, both these products are made by Kiwi. Camp Dry is something that you would apply to a breathable type of fabric like a Gore-Tex or a Gore-Tex-like fabric. And this, even though it's designed for breathable clothing, when you apply it to something that is supposed to be waterproof like Gore-Tex, you will get your waterproof coating back on. But when you apply it to something that was never designed to be waterproof or water resistant for that matter, you can then make that product a higher level of water resistance. And it all depends on what you want to do with it. Again, you would be able to find multiple manufacturers that have this type of waterproof treating for any type of the fabrics that you have, for any of the garments that you have. My next video, I'm going to be showing you how you can use the Camp Dry to be able to use on just ordinary fabric in order to make it as water resistant as the military grade soft shell fabric that I demonstrated just a few moments ago. This particular Columbia rain jacket that I demonstrated and showed you just how not waterproof or water resistant it is, I'm going to be treating it with the boot dry. And essentially all I'm going to do is lay it out flat, and I'm going to spray this area completely on one side, allow that to dry completely. I'm going to flip it over to the other side, let it dry completely, and then I'm going to be laying it out so I can reapply this boot waterproof to the shoulders and the hood more heavily than I am the rest of it. This is very similar to the process that I'm going to demonstrate in my next video with my Multicam Anorak, where I'm going to be putting the camp dry on it. So there's still hope for garments that have lost their DWR or were never waterproof or water resistant to begin with. Now we're going to take a look at the hard shell wet weather gear that I have. This is a complete rain suit. This was a Gore-Tex like type fabric, and it has all of the visual appearances of Gore-Tex and is manufactured in the same way, in that all of the seams have been taped, and visually it looks exactly like Gore-Tex. However, just because it's Gore-Tex like does not make it as Gore-Tex effective. This is a pair of Gore-Tex Gators that I bought about 10 years ago from Outdoor Research, and these things have stood the test of time and had been abused vigorously through my many outings in the woods. They have turned many a briar. It's a combination of Gore-Tex fabric, which you can see the Gore-Tex fabric has a bit of a different texture here. There's also Gore-Tex underneath this heavier. This is probably I would say that's 1000D Cordura. However, it could be 500D. However, it is more than thick enough to be able to turn the briars, and all of the areas that were to be exposed to the briars are coated with an extra layer of the Cordura, and the areas that are not prone to being brushed against the briars and thorns are just left Gore-Tex. These are made exactly the same way of real Gore-Tex. All the seams are sealed, and these are truly waterproof. The Cordura over the years, because it is so rough now, because it's been so abused by briars, a little bit of moisture stands on the Cordura, however does not pass through into the interior of the Gators. Now let's take a closer look at the hard shell Gore-Tex like fabric rain suit I have here. Now this Gore-Tex like jacket that I have here is manufactured by TruSpec, and this was one of the first hard shells that was available to the general public, not military issue, that was manufactured in Multicam, and that's why I picked it up. Now I'm saying this is not all fabrics that are Gore-Tex like are Gore-Tex quality. As you can see, this does exactly the same thing that the soft shell did, that was made out of military quality soft shell fabric, and you know, water just runs right off of it. However, just like the soft shell, if it's, you know, rubbed, it will permeate in through the fabric. Gore-Tex does not do that. Also, with this Gore-Tex like fabric, it cannot protect your body from the impact of rain droplets. And rain droplets, when falling on the shoulders or on the hood, on the sleeves, will actually get this soaking through quality very rapidly. Therefore, this is not waterproof. And again, the DWR can save this garment. Since this is supposed to be a waterproof garment, I am going to retreat this with the boot dry. The boot waterproofing on the shoulders, the hoods, all of those areas that are going to be impacted by those heavy raindrops, and all of the rest of it I'm going to be DWR treating it with the camp dry. So therefore, if by any chance this does have any breathability, it will be able to breathe a little bit, whereas the areas that are going to be affected the most by the heavy rainfall and is going to be impacted the most by the raindrops and the force of the water being pushed through the fabric, I'm going to be using the boot dry in order to reestablish that DWR, which may never have been placed on this to begin with, or if it was, it definitely needs to be retreated. The last hard shell we're going to look at, and again, this could very easily be considered a soft shell because of the flexibility of the fabric. However, this is just your regular run-of-the-mill poncho. And this particular one is manufactured by USGI Industries. And this is very different than the poncho that I was issued when I was in the United States Army. The waterproof coating that's on the interior, I believe, is more of a Teflon base than it is a rubber base. And I do not know how well this is going to work. I haven't had this long, just a matter of a month or so, and haven't been able to take it out and actually get a good test of it in the rain. However, every single poncho that I have looked at that have been manufactured recently that was not military issue has this type of a coating on the interior. Now, the USGI poncho that I had when I was in the military, it was a rubber-based coating, just like our wet weather suit was. And it did not breathe, and it was waterproof. However, as with all rubber-coated garments, that rubber will eventually break down. And when that rubber breaks down, there's going to be areas to where that moisture is going to pass through the nylon on the exterior and pass through to the interior. Now, if by any chance, when I do have the opportunity to test this poncho out, and it proves itself not to be waterproof, then I can go ahead and retreat it, if it had ever been treated before, with a DWR in the form of the camp dry or the boot dry. I would use a boot dry on this because this is supposed to be waterproof, not supposed to be water resistant. If by any chance you still have, or you have picked up recently, a USGI issued poncho that is rubber coated, and by any chance it begins to fail and is no longer waterproof or water resistant, well, yeah, you can go ahead and coat it with a DWR treatment with either the camp dry or the boot dry or any of the equivalents. However, let's just say, for the sake of saying so, that just a couple little sections of your poncho, let's say right here at the corners of your shoulders, have become to wear away just a little bit, and you notice that some of that rubber has begun to deteriorate just on those points. Again, not a whole big deal, but it's definitely enough to allow that water to absorb through the nylon that's on the exterior. What you can do is to take a piece of cardstock, like a folder or something like that. You could even use brown paper bag, and cut a hole in it roughly a little bit larger than the area itself. You're forming a template or a stencil. Lay it over that area that has been worn or has began to break down on that area, and you can utilize Flex Seal to spot treat that particular area, and you can retreat any of those rubber coated areas that have begun to fail. Likewise, if you have an old surplus Alice pack, and it is old, all of them are very old now, and that rubber coating that's on the inside of the top flap that covers the top of your pack, that has begun to deteriorate. It's such a small area, you could actually completely recoat that entire area with Flex Seal. Now a poncho, if you are going to attempt to completely recoat the interior of a poncho with Flex Seal, that's going to, first of all, run into a lot of money because this stuff ain't cheap. The other thing that's going to happen is you are going to turn this very flexible soft shell like hard shell rain gear into a very rigid, bulky, and heavy piece of rain apparel. And wouldn't recommend treating the whole thing with Flex Seal. However, you most certainly can spot treat it on those areas that may have lost their rubber protectant coating due to hard areas that rub against, and it will work just fine. Now, a lot of companies have begun to put waterproof ratings on their waterproof garments, and what that does is it gives you some reassurance from the factory as to what degree of water repellency that particular garment may have. Let me explain how that works. Now, in the factory, they're going to take samples of the fabric that is supposed to be waterproof or water resistant, and they will lock the fabric in a type of frame that is elevated on legs. It's a small portion of the fabric, and they lock that in to where it's perfectly smooth and flat, not stretched out, but is perfectly flat on the little stand. Then they will put a cylinder on that, and they lock it down to where it creates a seal with the stand. That cylinder is graduated in millimeters, and it's approximately 1 inch in diameter. And what they will do is they will slowly begin to put water in this cylinder, and they will monitor underneath the stand, and when the garment begins to leak, when a drop of water goes out from underneath that fabric, at that point, whatever the degree or level of millimeters of water that's on the graduated cylinder is leveled to, that millimeter rating is now its waterproof rating. If the water levels are below 10,000 millimeters, then it has no waterproof or water resistant level whatsoever. It's basic fabric. However, if it is 10,000 millimeters, then it has a very light water resistance. And as that scales up, if you get to 20,000 millimeters, then that is waterproof or highly water resistant. And the reason that the resistant thing is usually put in there is because even a waterproof type of fabric like Gore-Tex, when it is exposed to extreme high pressures of rain, like wind-driven, very hard-hitting rain, that can affect that waterproof quality and make it water resistant. Again, the only type of true waterproof garment is something that is zero porous quality. There's no pores in it whatsoever. Something that's been rubber coated has no pores in it and therefore is waterproof. But if you have, let's say, you have 15,000 millimeters, that should give you a good average protection from light rain and would satisfy most of your needs. However, if you're looking for something that is going to be as waterproof can be with all of these modern fabrics out there today, you're looking at something with a waterproof rating of 20,000 millimeters minimum. Well folks, I hope that this video helped you understand wet weather gear just a little bit better, and understand the differences between certain key vocabulary words when you're looking to purchase wet weather apparel for yourself or for others for that matter. And knowing the definitions of those key words can make a huge difference in your enjoyment of the outdoors. It's like when I purchased my Columbia rain jacket, it had all the keywords there. It should have been waterproof. However, as you saw, it was not. So even if you understand all the vocabulary, you understand the idea of waterproof ratings, you understand the different types of DWRs, you know the difference between hard shell, soft shell, and waterproof and water resistant, it's still one of those things that you're relying upon the accuracy and the honesty of the manufacturers to provide you the straight information you need to make an informed decision. Even though you know everything that you should know by watching this video, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a manufacturer that's going to live up to their own advertising. So as always, read those reviews, go in informed to a purchase, and buyer beware. And as always folks, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.